So the 2023-24 Edmonton Oilers season, it's not going according to plan, is it? I think it was Mike Tyson that famously said that pretty much everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And the 2023-24 version of the Edmonton Oilers this season has definitely punched them in the face. Right off the bat, there was that 2-game start against the Vancouver Canucks. Definitely did not go according to plan. 2 losses back-to-back to start the season. This is not a team that has ever planned on that. And so then they got a win, and then they lost that game to Philadelphia. This is not a team that is planning to lose to the Philadelphia Flyers with where the Philadelphia Flyers are at right now. But it happened. And so you would think at that point, things can't get much worse than that. And in fact, the next game, when they come out and they start, it seems like, nope, things aren't going to get that bad. It kind of seems like maybe things are going to start to go back to normal. But they come out on Hockey Night in Canada against the Winnipeg Jets, and they put up a 2-goal lead in the first period. Great. This is the team that we were expecting. And then the third period, disaster strikes in pretty much every way that it could, because not only did they give up the tying goal on just a weird mistake by Stuart Skinner, one that honestly I don't think that Stuart Skinner would ever repeat that mistake, but it happened. It happened. It was a mistake. It was what it was. And these things will happen from time to time in hockey at any level, let alone at the NHL level. But after that, the absolute worst thing that could happen, Connor McDavid goes down with an upper body injury. And since that game last Saturday, the expectation is he's going to be out up to 2 weeks. He's probably not even going to get to suit up in the Heritage Classic game, which for all the people that paid those prices for those tickets, I do feel badly for you. And so with Connor McDavid out injured, God, at this point, the way that this season is going, what can you even say about that? Like 2 weeks with no Connor McDavid, it's not impossible that could make the difference between being at the top of your division or not making the playoffs at all. And especially given that the Oilers were not necessarily looking white hot just yet with Connor McDavid in the lineup. You take him away from the lineup, and now what do you have to say about that? What can anybody say about that? Well, I do have something to say about that, and I think it's going to surprise a lot of people. But what I have to say about that is, well, good. Which sounds like an absolutely deranged thing to say. A team that is arguably maybe not as good as we actually even thought that they were with that player now suddenly doesn't have the best hockey player in the world, and we're saying good? Well, let me kind of reel that back and explain it a little bit. So there's like an electric dance music / hip-hop artist that probably a lot of people don't really necessarily know about. His name is Akira the Don, and I'm actually a pretty big fan of his. And it might have been just a few days before this whole thing happened, I discovered this track that he had made a little while ago, and it just kind of escaped my notice. And there's one featuring Jocko Willink. And so Akira the Don, he's been doing this thing called the Meaningwave project, where he basically takes like a lot of these thought figures, and he takes their speeches and he rearranges them to music, and sometimes he actually turns them into some really amazing music. And this was one of the ones that really hit. And so in this thing, which by the way, I'll put a link to it somewhere so that people can find it. I should probably tell you where. I'll put it in the description of this video. And so in this song, he's using this clip from where Jocko Willink was talking about a conversation that he had with one of his employees. And he was trying to tell him about some sort of problem that they were having. And they were kind of trying to explain the thing, and then they just kind of stopped and said, it's like, well, I don't know. It's like, I already know what you're going to say. And Jocko says to him, well, what am I going to say? He's like, you're going to say good. Like, no matter how bad it is, you're going to say good. And so Jocko, he says, well, yeah. So there is that old proverb, and I'm just thinking to myself right now, I almost feel like I want to say that it's an old Chinese proverb, But I'm not even sure that that's right. I'm not even sure that this is a Chinese proverb, but I know it's from someplace. What a thing to say. It's from someplace. Everything is from someplace. But anyhow, this one in particular is that, crisis is just another word for opportunity. And isn't that true? Like, especially for something like this, you might be sitting there thinking to yourself, I do not understand how the crisis of Connor McDavid being injured for up to 2 weeks, I don't understand how that's an opportunity. Well, over the short term, yeah, definitely. It is. Well, over the short term, yeah, it definitely doesn't really feel like much of an opportunity, does it? The team's going to be out playing without the best player in the world for up to 2 weeks. But what about all of those other players on that team? What kind of opportunity does this present for them? And indeed, it does present an opportunity for them. It definitely presents a lot of these players with an opportunity to step up and play at a level beyond what was previously expected of them, because the guy that was expected to lead this team isn't there to do it, and somebody has to do it. So imagine this for a minute. Maybe you're Dylan Holloway, and you're a guy who was actually expected to, at some point, be an offensive leader on this team. Because let's face it, we have to be realistic. The prospects of keeping the best player in the world and the second best player in the world, Leon Draisaitl, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, the number 1 and 2 best players in the world, together on the same team in a league with a salary cap, strikes me as fairly unlikely. Maybe Leon Draisaitl will decide that, being the second best player in the world, that he can be paid like the 12th or 14th or 16th most of any player in the world. But I don't think that his agent is going to go along with that very easily. So I think that we do have to very much get acquainted with the idea and get very comfortable with the idea that at some point within the next few years, we might not have one or both of these players. I mean, let's be honest with you, as Edmonton Oilers fans, we understand that it is possible. It's very difficult to keep the 2 best players in the world together. And it's very possible to lose both of them because we've seen that. We've had that happen. We had Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier when they were the number 1 and 2 player in the entire world. And then within about 4 years, we said goodbye to both of those players. It can happen. And when that does happen, if it happens, or I should say, if it happens, somebody is going to have to step forward and take the offensive leadership of this team. Dylan Holloway is definitely a guy with the skills to do it. And at the AHL level, it definitely looks like he should be able to do it, but he hasn't translated that kind of offensive success into the NHL yet. So, with Connor McDavid injured, you would think that Dylan Holloway is a guy that can take a step forward and show that he can do that. Or maybe this is an opportunity for Evander Kane to show up and be the player that we've been expecting him to be for the last 2 years. I mean, yeah, he spent a long portion of last year out with that wrist injury, and he didn't seem like he was quite the same after the rest of that season after coming back from that injury. Well, it's another season, and it's about time for him to go back to being the kind of player that he was when he got here. The player with that killer instinct that this team really did need. This is his opportunity to step up and be that player again. Or maybe this is a good opportunity for Connor Brown to show up at all, because in all honesty, for a player that seemed like he was potentially going to be a very exciting addition to this team as a result of his on-ice history with Connor McDavid, so far this season, Connor Brown has been a stealth pilot, invisible. But imagine if all of these players seize this opportunity, and they take that step forward and they bring the team together, and suddenly now, instead of coming back to a team that's in disarray, with the task at hand of having to somehow get them back together, and get them back on track and playing as a team again. Maybe Connor McDavid comes back to a team that has come together as a team, actually has it together, and now they're just adding the best player in the world to a team that basically already has its shit together. That would obviously be a very good thing, and that's something that could make the difference between this team making the playoffs or potentially even winning the Stanley Cup, as a lot of people have been expecting that they do this season. Because I think that the one thing that we can say for certain is that the team as it was when Connor McDavid got injured is not a team that is going to win the Stanley Cup. At the point when Connor McDavid got hurt, this was a team that honestly looked like they were leaning just a little bit too much on Connor McDavid. And Connor McDavid, he actually kind of looked like a guy who was looking around and saying, hey, where's my support? I need 4 other guys with me on the ice at all times. Where are they? It doesn't look like any of them are showing up. And at that particular juncture of the season, it didn't look like they had shown up yet. Maybe with no Connor McDavid around, maybe these guys take the opportunity to show up. And if that's the case, then I would say that over the long run, I think that this team will actually be better off for the absence of Connor McDavid for a couple of weeks. And they have at times since then, and in the 2 games since then, they have at times looked like maybe they actually will. You know, they did have 3 5-on-5 goals against Minnesota, which for a team that has leaned, quite a bit too much on their power play over these last few seasons, to get 3 5-on-5 goals in a single game with no Connor McDavid, that's a pretty good step forward. I feel like there were portions of the game against the New York Rangers where they could have had at least that many, if not for the stellar play of Jonathan Quick last night. So it is fair to say that whatever benefits of not having Connor McDavid around haven't necessarily manifested themselves in the win column just yet. But I do think that there are some signs of life that are very promising. Will those signs of life blossom into something that can win a Stanley Cup when Connor McDavid returns? I guess the only thing that we're going to be able to do is wait and see.